Captain Lee Hyun stared at the main screen of his battleship as red dots filled the display. Each dot was an alien warship, and there were thousands of them. His hands gripped the command chair as he watched humanity's worst nightmare come true. "Sir, we're getting reports from all human colonies," said Lieutenant Park Jun from the communications station. His voice shook. "The aliens are attacking everywhere at once." Lee Hyun closed his eyes for a moment. 3 days ago, the Galactic Council had made their announcement. They called humans a contamination species that threatened the balance of the galaxy. They said humanity had to be removed completely. No negotiations. No mercy. The captain opened his eyes and looked around the bridge. His crew was scared, but they were still working. These were good people. They deserved better than this. "What's the status of the evacuation ships?" he asked. "Titan Station is loading the last civilians now," Park Jun replied. "Dr. Park Mina says they need 10 more minutes." Lee Hyun nodded. Dr. Park Mina was his sister, one of the smartest scientists humanity had ever produced. If anyone could save some of their people, it was her. The Vorthak Empire led the attack. These reptilian aliens had convinced the other species that humans were dangerous. They said humans bred too fast and spread too quickly. They claimed humans would destroy the galaxy if left alone. "Sir, enemy ships are moving into attack formation," reported Ensign Kim Dal from the weapons station. "All ships, form defensive line," Lee Hyun ordered into his communicator. "Protect the evacuation vessels at all costs." Around him, the last ships of the human fleet moved into position. There were only 47 ships left. Against them came over 3,000 alien vessels. It was not a fair fight. On Titan Station, Dr. Park Mina ran through the corridors as alarms blared. She carried a metal case that contained the most important discovery of her career. 3 months ago, her team had found something buried deep in Titan's ice. It was technology from an ancient alien race, older than any known civilization. "Dr. Park, the last transport is leaving in 5 minutes," called out her assistant, researcher Choi Bin. "I need to get this to the ship," she said, holding up the case. "This technology might be our only hope." The ancient artifacts were strange. They seemed to respond to human brain waves in ways no one understood. Other alien species had found similar objects before, but they never worked for them. Only humans could activate them. Back on the flagship, Lee Hyun watched as the first wave of alien ships opened fire. Green energy beams cut through space, striking human vessels. 2 destroyers exploded immediately. "Return fire," he ordered. The human ships fought back with everything they had. Missiles streaked toward the alien fleet while laser cannons blazed. But for every alien ship they destroyed, 10 more took its place. "Sir, we're getting reports from Earth," Park Jun said, his face pale. "The orbital defense stations are gone. They're bombing the surface." Lee Hyun felt something break inside his chest. Earth was humanity's home, where billions of people lived. Children playing in parks, families having dinner, students going to school. All of it was being destroyed by aliens who had decided humans didn't deserve to exist. "How long until Titan Station is clear?" he asked. 3 minutes, sir." Another human ship exploded on the screen. Then another. The aliens weren't just trying to win a battle. They were trying to erase every trace of humanity from the galaxy. "Doctor." Park Mina reached the docking bay as the last transport ship powered up its engines. She could see alien fighters approaching through the station's windows. They would be here soon. "Doctor, we have to go now," Choi Bin said, grabbing her arm. She nodded and ran toward the ship. As they climbed aboard, she looked back at Titan Station one last time. Her laboratory was there, along with years of research. But the artifacts in her case might be more important than everything else combined. The transport ship lifted off, just as Vorthak fighters reached the station. Energy beams sliced through the metal corridors where she had been walking minutes before. "Sir, Titan evacuation is complete," Park Jun reported to Lee Hyun. All ships, begin retreat to rally point 7, the captain ordered. It hurt to give that command. Retreat meant leaving Earth and the inner colonies to their fate, but staying would only mean more deaths with no purpose. The human fleet began to withdraw, fighting a running battle against overwhelming odds. The aliens followed, determined to finish what they had started. As they fled, reports came in from across human space. New Tokyo was burning. The farming colonies in the Centauri system were gone. The research stations around Jupiter had been destroyed. Everywhere humans had lived, the aliens were erasing them. "Sir, we're losing the Shanghai," reported Kim Dial.Lee. Hyun watched another dot disappear from his screen. The Shanghai had been home to 800 crew members, good people who had families and dreams and hopes for the future. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked quietly. 31, sir. From a fleet of over 2,000 ships, only 31 remained. From colonies holding 50 billion humans, only a few million had escaped. Dr. Park Mina sat in the transport ship as it followed the retreating fleet. Around her, refugees cried and comforted each other. Children asked where their parents were. Adults stared at nothing, trying to understand how their world had ended so quickly. She opened the case and looked at the artifacts inside. They were smooth and dark, covered in patterns that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. When she touched them, they felt warm and somehow alive. "What are you?" she whispered. The artifacts didn't answer, but she felt something, a presence maybe, as if something was listening. The fleet reached Rally Point 7, an empty system far from any inhabited worlds. The surviving ships gathered together, their crews exhausted and heartbroken. "Captain," Park Jun said, "we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council." "Put it through," Lee Hyun replied. The screen showed a Vorthak commander, his scaled face cold and emotionless. "Humans," he said, "your species has been judged unfit for existence. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Lee Hyun stood, up slowly. "This is Captain Lee Hyun of the human fleet. We will never surrender to murderers and cowards." The Vorthak hissed, a sound like steam escaping. "Then you will die slowly, human. We will hunt down every last one of your kind." The transmission ended. Lee Hyun looked around at his crew. They were the last free humans in the galaxy. Behind them lay the ashes of their civilization. Ahead lay only darkness and the promise of more death. But they were still alive. And as long as they lived, humanity would not be extinct. "Set course for the outer rim," he ordered. "We're going to find a place to hide and rebuild." As the small fleet jumped to hyperspace, Dr. Park Mina felt the artifacts grow warmer in her hands. Something was awakening, something that had been waiting for this moment. The aliens thought they had won. They thought humanity was finished. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 3 years had passed since the Great Dying. Kim Tae pressed his face against the cold metal wall of the asteroid and listened. Outside, Vorthak patrol ships searched for any sign of human life. Inside the hollow rock, 200 survivors held their breath and waited. The asteroid had been their home for 8 months now. Before that, they had lived in the wreckage of a destroyed space station. Before that, in the cargo hold of a damaged freighter. Always moving, always hiding, always one step ahead of the aliens who wanted them dead. "They're moving away," whispered Yoon Soo, the young woman who monitored their sensors. "We're safe for now." Kim Tae nodded and moved through the narrow tunnels that connected their living spaces. The asteroid was small, barely big enough for all of them. They had carved out rooms for sleeping, eating, and working. Everything was cramped and uncomfortable, but it was better than being dead. He found Dr. Choi Bin in what they called the workshop. The engineer was bent over a strange device, carefully connecting wires and circuit boards. Next to him lay one of the ancient artifacts that Dr. Park Mina had discovered. "Any progress?" Kim Tae asked. Choi Bin looked up, his face tired but excited. I think I'm starting to understand how it works. Watch this. He placed his hand on the artifact. Immediately, it began to glow with a soft blue light. The device he had been building hummed to life, its display showing patterns and numbers that meant nothing to Kim Tae. It responds to human touch, Choi Bin explained. But more than that, it responds to human thoughts. I can feel it in my mind, like it's trying to communicate. Kim Tae frowned. Is that safe? I don't know, Choi Bin admitted. But what choice do we have? The aliens have better ships, better weapons, better everything. This technology might be our only chance. Across the galaxy, other groups of human survivors were discovering the same thing. On a dead moon in the Kepler system, Lee Hyun's fleet had found another cache of ancient artifacts. Dr. Park Mina worked day and night to understand them, driven by the knowledge that millions of lives might depend on her success. The artifacts were scattered across the galaxy, hidden in places where only humans seemed able to find them. Each one was different, but they all shared the same strange ability to connect with human minds. Captain, Park Jun said, entering the makeshift laboratory where Dr. Park Mina worked. We're getting reports from other survivor groups. They're all finding the same kind of technology. Lee Hyun stood beside his sister as she examined the latest artifact. This one was larger than the others, shaped like a crystal but made of something that wasn't quite matter. It's like they were left for us, Dr. Park Mina said quietly. Hidden where only humans would think to look, designed to work only with human neural patterns. Left by who? Lee Hyun asked. I don't know yet, but whoever they were, they wanted us to find these. The Vorthak Empire was growing frustrated. 3 years of hunting, and they still hadn't found all the human survivors. Worse, the humans were getting bolder. Supply convoys disappeared. Patrol, ships went missing. Communication stations went offline. General Korth, the Vorthak commander in charge of the human extermination, studied the reports from his flagship. The humans were using new tactics, new technology that his intelligence officers couldn't explain. How many ships have we lost this month? He asked his aide. 47, General. All to what appear to be human raiders. Korth's tail lashed in. Anger. 47 ships lost to a species that was supposed to be extinct. The Galactic Council was asking questions he couldn't answer. Double the patrols, he ordered, and put a bounty on any information about human hideouts. Back in the asteroid, Kim Tae was planning their next strike. His people had been practicing with the new technology, learning how to use it in combat. The results were incredible. The supply convoy will pass through the Horus system tomorrow, said Lieutenant Song Hana, his best pilot. 3 freighters with minimal escort. What kind of cargo? Kim Tae asked. Weapons and ammunition, heading for the Vorthak base on Kepler Prime. Kim Tae smiled grimly. Then we make sure it never arrives. How many ships can we field? 6 fighters, all equipped with the new systems. The new systems were Choi Bin's masterpiece. By connecting human pilots directly to their ships through the artifacts, he had created fighters that moved like living creatures. The pilots could feel what their ships felt, react faster than any alien computer system. The next day, Song Hana led the attack on the convoy. Her fighter slipped out of hyperspace just as the Vorthak ships entered the system. Around her, 5 other human pilots did the same. Remember, she said into her communicator, we're not just fighting for revenge. We're fighting for the future. The Vorthak escorts never knew what hit them. The human fighters moved like nothing they had ever seen, dodging weapons fire that should have been impossible to avoid. Energy beams that should have destroyed them passed harmlessly through space. What are they? Screamed the Vorthak captain as his escort ships exploded around him. Song Hana's fighter danced between the laser blasts, her mind connected to the ship's systems through the artifact mounted in her cockpit. She could feel the ship's structure, its engines, its weapons. More than that, she could feel the enemy ships as if they were living things. The convoy was destroyed in minutes. No human ships were lost. Word of the attack spread quickly through both human and alien channels. For the aliens, it was a sign that the humans were becoming more dangerous. For the survivors, it was hope. Dr. Park Mina made a breakthrough 3 days later. She had been studying the largest artifact when it suddenly activated on its own. Images filled her mind, pictures of a galaxy from long ago. She saw a species that looked almost human, but taller and more graceful. They had built great cities among the stars and explored the deepest mysteries of the universe. They had been wise and peaceful, seeking knowledge rather than conquest, but they had also been betrayed. The images showed fleets of alien ships attacking the peaceful species, the same aliens that now ruled the Galactic Council, Vorthak, Calarian, Hydrax, all of them working together to destroy a civilization that had done nothing wrong. They were called the Architects, Dr. Park Mina told her brother later. They built this technology and hid it before they were wiped out. They knew someone would come after them who could use it. Someone like us, Lee Hyun said. Exactly like us. We're not the first species the Galactic Council has tried to exterminate, but we might be the first to fight back effectively. The revelation changed everything. The humans weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to complete something the architects had started millions of years ago. Across the galaxy, survivor groups began to coordinate their efforts. Kim Tae's raiders joined forces with other groups. Dr. Park Mina shared her discoveries with every human scientist still alive. The artifacts began to reveal more secrets. Some humans found they could interface directly with the technology, their minds expanding to encompass new abilities. Others discovered they could manipulate matter and energy in ways that seemed impossible. Thakur. Aliens began to realize their mistake. They had not just tried to exterminate humanity. They had awakened something that had been sleeping for millions of years. Sir, Park Jun reported to Lee Hyun, we're receiving transmissions from survivor groups across the galaxy. They're all reporting success with the architect technology. Lee Hyun nodded, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, his people were learning to use powers beyond imagination. The same aliens who had tried to erase them were about to discover what humanity was truly capable of. Send a message to all groups, he said. Tell them the hiding is over. It's time to take back what's ours. The second phase of the war was about to begin. Dr. Park Mina's hands shook as she placed them on the central artifact. It was larger than all the others, a perfect sphere that seemed to contain swirling galaxies inside its surface. For weeks, she had been preparing for this moment. Today, she would attempt the first full interface with architect technology. Are you sure about this? Asked Choi Bin, monitoring the equipment around her. The energy readings are off the charts. We don't have a choice, she replied. The partial connections aren't enough. If we're going to understand what the architects left for us, someone has to go all the way. Around the hidden laboratory, her team watched nervously. They had seen what happened when humans touched the smaller artifacts. Enhanced reflexes, improved thinking, strange new senses. But this device was different. It pulsed with power that made their instruments go crazy. Dr. Park Mina took a deep breath and pressed her palms against the sphere. The world exploded into light and sound and sensation beyond anything she had ever imagined. Her consciousness was pulled out of her body and into a vast network of connected minds. For a moment she panicked, thinking she was being absorbed or destroyed. Then she heard them. Millions of voices speaking in harmony across the ages. Welcome, inheritor, they said without words. We have been waiting. She found herself standing in a place that wasn't quite real. surrounded by beings of light that took the shape of the architects she had seen in the visions. They were tall and graceful, with eyes that held the wisdom of ages. "You are the ones who left the technology," she said, not sure if she was speaking or thinking. "We are the memory of what was," replied the nearest figure. "When our people knew they would fall, they chose to preserve our knowledge in a form that could only be accessed by those with the right neural patterns. Humans," Dr. Park-Mina said. "You were not the first we seeded, but you are the first to survive long enough to find us. The others were found and destroyed before they could awaken." Images flowed into her mind. Other species across the galaxy, all showing the same curiosity and adaptability that marked humanity. All of them hunted down and exterminated by the current galactic powers before they could grow strong enough to threaten the established order. "Why us?" she asked. "What makes humans special?" "You refuse to accept defeat," the architect replied. "Others fought bravely, but when faced with extinction, they despaired. You adapt, survive, and become stronger. This is why we chose your neural patterns as the key to our legacy." Captain Yoon Jae was 3,000 light-years away when the awakening happened. His small group of survivors was hiding in an abandoned mining station when he felt the change. Every artifact they had found suddenly came alive, resonating with new power. "Captain," called out Specialist Lim Hai from the communication station, "I'm getting readings from all our devices. It's like they're all connected now." Yoon Jae walked over to the artifact they had been studying. It was shaped like a pyramid, covered in symbols that shifted and changed as he watched. When he touched it now, he felt something vast and ancient touch his mind in return. Knowledge flowed into him. Not just information, but understanding. He saw how matter and energy were connected, how space and time could be bent, how consciousness itself was a force that could shape reality. "Sir," Lim Hai said, her voice filled with wonder. "Look at your hands." Yoon Jae looked down and gasped. His hands were glowing with the same blue light as the artifacts. More than that, he could feel the metal walls around him, sense their atomic structure. With a thought, he reached out and changed them. The wall in front of him shifted, flowing like water to create a perfect doorway where solid metal had been moments before. "How did you do that?" Lim Hai asked. "I'm not sure," Yoon Jae replied, staring at his still glowing hands. "But I think we just became something more than human." Across the galaxy, other survivors were experiencing the same transformation. Some found they could manipulate matter with their thoughts. Others discovered they could sense things across vast distances or move faster than should have been possible. Kim Tae was leading a raid on a Vorthak supply base when the change hit him. One moment he was a normal human hiding behind cover. The next, he could see through the walls of the enemy compound, sense where every alien soldier was positioned. "Song Hana," he said into his communicator, "there are 12 guards in the main building, not 6 like our intelligence said." "How can you know that?" she replied from her position on the other side of the base. "I can see them," Kim Tae said, not understanding it himself. "I can see all of them." The raid that should have taken hours was over in minutes. The humans moved through the base like ghosts, always knowing where their enemies were, always one step ahead. The Vorthak defenders never had a chance. Dr. Park-Mina learned much during her time with the Architect Consciousness. The galaxy had once been very different. Instead of the rigid hierarchy controlled by a few species, it had been a place where all intelligent life could grow and explore together. The current powers destroyed that, the architect explained. They feared what they could not control. When our people tried to mediate, to restore balance, they were branded as threats and eliminated. "Like they're trying to do to us," Dr. Park-Mina said. "Exactly. But we prepared for this. Our technology was designed not just to give you tools, but to help you become what you need to be to restore justice to the galaxy." She saw the full scope of what the architects had left behind, hidden bases throughout the galaxy, each one containing technology and knowledge beyond current understanding. Weapons that could level planets, ships that could cross the galaxy in days, tools that could reshape matter itself. But more than that, she saw the plan. The architects hadn't just wanted revenge. They had wanted to create a species that could rule justly, that could prevent the kind of genocide that had destroyed them. "You're making us into gods," she whispered. "We are giving you the power to choose," the architect corrected. "What you do with it will determine whether you become gods or monsters. We believe humans will choose wisely." When Dr. Parkmina finally disconnected from the artifact, she found that hours had passed. Her team crowded around her, asking questions she was still processing answers to. "What did you learn?" asked Choi Bin. "Everything," she said simply. "I learned everything." She stood up, feeling the power flowing through her enhanced mind. With a thought, she activated every piece of architect technology in the room simultaneously. Screens lit up with information, devices hummed to life, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with potential. "Send a message to all survivor groups," she ordered. "Tell them to find the nearest architect facility. The coordinates are—" She paused, accessing memories that weren't quite her own. "I'll transmit them directly to all groups." Somehow she knew she could do it. The awakening had connected all humans who had interfaced with the technology. She could feel them across the galaxy. Thousands of minds linked by the architect network. Lee Hyun received his sister's message while his fleet was hiding near a dead star. The coordinates she sent led to a system that wasn't on any map, hidden behind layers of technology that made it invisible to alien sensors. "Set course for those coordinates," he ordered. "Maximum stealth." When they arrived, they found wonders, beyond imagination. A massive facility built into an asteroid, perfectly preserved after millions of years. Ships that looked like works of art, but contained technology that made their current vessels seem like toys. "Captain," Park Jun said, his voice filled with awe, "there are dozens of these ships here. Each one could probably take on a Vorthak battle fleet. But the ships were just the beginning. The facility contained manufacturing equipment, research, labs, living spaces designed for hundreds of thousands of occupants. Most importantly, it contained the central hub that connected all architect sites across the galaxy. Dr. Park Mina arrived 3 days later, her mind now fully integrated with the architect network. She moved through the facility like she had built it herself, activating systems that had waited eons for the right touch. "How many sites are there?" Lee Hyun asked her. "Thousands," she replied, "hidden throughout the galaxy, each one designed for a specific purpose. Some are weapons factories, others are research stations. A few are something much more important." "What could be more important than weapons?" Dr. Park Mina smiled, and for a moment, her brother saw something inhuman in her expression, something vast and ancient and terrible. "The ability to rewrite the fundamental laws of physics," she said. "The architects didn't just build tools, they built the power to reshape reality itself." As news of the discovery spread through the human survivor network, the balance of the galaxy began to shift. The species that had tried to exterminate humanity was about to discover that they had awakened something far beyond their understanding. The war was entering a new phase, and this time, humanity would not be the victims. Lieutenant Song Hana stood on the bridge of the newly activated architect vessel, watching as reality bent around them. The ship didn't travel through space so much as convince space to move around it. What should have been a 3-week journey to the Vorthak fortress world took less than an hour. "I still can't believe this is real," said Ensign Bei-Wu from the navigation station. His hands moved over controls that responded to thought as much as touch. 6 months ago, we were hiding in asteroids." Song Hana nodded, but her attention was focused on the mission ahead. Intelligence reports said the fortress world of Carix held over 50,000 Vorthak military personnel and enough firepower to level a dozen planets. It was considered impregnable. Today, she would prove that wrong. Approaching the target system, reported the ship's AI, speaking in a voice that sounded almost human. The architect technology had created artificial minds that were more alive than any computer should be. Through the view screen, Song Hana could see Carrix floating in space like a metal moon. Orbital weapons platforms surrounded it, their massive guns tracking any ship that came too close. In the old days, an entire human fleet would have been destroyed before getting within 1,000,000 kilometers. "Activate the phase systems," she ordered. The ship shimmered and became translucent. They were still there, but existing slightly outside. Normal reality. The Vorthak sensors couldn't detect them, couldn't track them, couldn't stop them. "Take us through their defensive line," Song Hana commanded. They passed between the orbital platforms like ghosts, so close that she could see Vorthak technicians working at their stations through the windows. The aliens had no idea that death was floating past them. 3,000 light-years away, Captain Siak was leading his own mission. His target was a Vorthak fleet of over 200 ships, the largest military force the Reptilian Empire had ever assembled. They were heading toward a human refugee colony, planning to finish the extermination that had started 4 years ago. But Siak had other plans. His ship dropped out of hyperspace, right in the middle of the alien formation. Alarms screamed on. Every Vorthak vessel, as their sensors, suddenly detected a human ship that hadn't been there a second before. "Human vessel," came the transmission from the fleet flagship. "You are surrounded. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Siak smiled and activated the architect control system he had learned to use. "Computer, analyze all enemy vessels and find their weaknesses." Information flowed into his mind. Every ship's design, every weapon system, every structural flaw. The architect technology didn't just show him what was there. It showed him how to exploit it. "Target the flagship's main reactor," he ordered his weapons officer, Corporal Nam Young. "Use the molecular disruptor." The weapon that fired from their ship looked like a simple beam of light, but when it touched the Vorthak flagship, the entire vessel simply came apart at the atomic level. One moment it was there, the next it was a cloud of scattered particles. The rest of the alien fleet opened fire, thousands of energy beams converging on Siak's position. But his ship danced between them like a leaf in the wind, the architect technology allowing it to move in ways that violated everything the aliens knew about physics. "Return fire," Siak said calmly. "Target their command and control systems." Back on Carrix, Song Hana's team had reached the fortress world's surface. The planet was covered in military installations, weapon factories, and training facilities. Millions of Vorthak soldiers lived and worked here, preparing for the final campaigns against any remaining human survivors. They landed their ship in the courtyard of the main command center, still phased slightly out of reality. Vorthak guards walked past them without seeing anything wrong. "Remember," Song Hana told her team as they prepared to disembark, "we're not here to kill everyone, we're here to send a message." She led 12 specially trained soldiers out of the ship. Each one had undergone the architect enhancement process. Their minds expanded and their bodies improved beyond normal human limits. They moved like shadows, invisible to alien eyes when they chose to be. The fortress that had never fallen to any enemy was infiltrated in minutes. Song Hana found the main command center and walked through the heavy security doors as if they weren't there. Inside, Vorthak generals planned their next attacks on human refugees, their scaled faces showing no emotion as they discussed genocide. "Attention," she said, deactivating her stealth field and appearing in the middle of the room. The aliens spun around, reaching for weapons that suddenly felt too heavy to lift. Song Hana had used the architect technology to increase gravity around their bodies, pinning them in place. "I am Lieutenant Song Hana of the Human Resistance," she announced. This fortress is now under human control. General Korth, the same Vorthak who had been hunting humans for years, hissed in fury. Impossible! This facility has defenses that are useless against technology you don't understand, Song Hana interrupted. Your empire declared war on humanity. You tried to exterminate us. Now you will learn what happens when humans fight back, she gestured, and every computer system in the command center activated at once. Information flowed across the screens, showing the locations of every Vorthak military installation, every fleet movement, every secret base. Your entire military network is now compromised, she explained. Every password, every code, every tactical plan. We know everything you know. Outside, her team was working through the fortress with mechanical precision. They disabled weapon systems, captured key personnel, and planted devices that would give humans permanent access to Vorthak communications. Osiok's battle was reaching its climax. Half of the Vorthak fleet had been destroyed, their ships torn, apart by weapons that turned matter into energy or simply convinced it to stop existing. The remaining vessels were trying to retreat, but their hyperspace engines had been disabled by some trick of architect technology. Sir, reported Nam Young, we're receiving surrender signals from 43 ships. Accept their surrender, Osiok replied, but keep the weapons locked on them and send a message to their home worlds. The message was simple. This is what happens when you try to destroy humanity. We are no longer prey. We are no longer hiding. We are coming for all of you. News of the two successful operations spread quickly through both human and alien channels. For the first time since the genocide began, humans had won major victories against their enemies. More importantly, they had done it with ease that shocked the galaxy. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss the human problem that was rapidly becoming the human threat. They have technology we've never seen before, reported the Calarian ambassador, his tentacles writhing with anxiety. Ships that phase in and out of reality, weapons that ignore our defenses, soldiers who move like ghosts. Where did they get such power? Demanded the Hydrax delegate, her crystalline body pulsing with agitated light. General Korth, participating by hologram from his captured fortress, had the answer. The artifacts, he said. Ancient technology hidden throughout the galaxy. Humans have found them and learned to use them. The chamber erupted in panicked discussion. Every species in the council had encountered similar artifacts over the centuries, but none had ever been able to activate them. They had always assumed the devices were broken or worthless. If humans can use this technology, said the council, chairman, a massive Vorthak whose age showed in his graying scales, then we may have made a terrible mistake. You think? Song Hana's voice came from speakers throughout the chamber. Somehow humans had tapped into their most secure communications. The holographic image of a young human woman appeared in the center of the room. She looked calm and confident, nothing like the desperate refugees the council remembered. My name is Lieutenant Song Hana, she said. I speak for all human survivors. You tried to exterminate us because you feared we might become a threat. Congratulations! You have created exactly what you were afraid of. What do you want? Asked the chairman. Song Hana smiled, and there was no warmth in it. Justice. You murdered 50 billion innocent people. You destroyed our worlds. Killed. Our children erased our civilization. Did you think there would be no consequences? We can negotiate, the Calarian ambassador said quickly. Reparations, territory, recognition of human sovereignty. You misunderstand, Song Hana interrupted. This is not a negotiation. This is a declaration. The galaxy will be remade according to human terms. Those who cooperate will be treated fairly. Those who resist will share the fate you intended for us. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Across human-controlled space, the transformation was accelerating. More architect facilities were being discovered and activated every day. Human soldiers were becoming something beyond what their species had ever been. Ships were being built that could cross the galaxy in hours and reshape planets with their weapons. Dr. Park Mina, now more architect than human in her thinking, watched the reports from her position aboard the primary command ship. The network, in her mind, showed her every human who had been enhanced, every ship that had been built, every world that had been liberated. "Sister," Li Hyun said, entering her laboratory, "are we doing the right thing?" She turned. Commander Jang Min stood at the edge of reality, looking out at the impossible sight before him. The architect homeworld hung in space like a crystal dream, its surface covered in structures that seemed to grow rather than be built. Geometric patterns spiraled across continents, connecting cities that floated in the air with spires that reached toward the stars. "Sir," reported Navigator Park Yoon from behind him, "the planetary defenses are powering up. They're recognizing us as the inheritors." Jang Min nodded, watching as massive installations that had slept for millions of years came to life. Energy fields stronger than anything the current galaxy possessed surrounded the planet. Weapons that could destroy solar systems tracked across space, and something vast and ancient stirred in the planet's core. "Take us down to the surface," he ordered. "It's time to claim our inheritance." The ship that carried them was itself a marvel of architect technology, grown rather than built from materials that existed in multiple dimensions at once. As they descended through the atmosphere, Jang Min could see the truth of what the galaxy had lost when the architects fell. This wasn't just a home world, it was a masterpiece of engineering and art combined, a place where billions of beings had lived in harmony with technology that made them nearly godlike. Cities flowed like water, buildings changed shape to meet the needs of their inhabitants, and the very air hummed with power. "The readings are incredible," whispered Dr. Nam Young, the expedition's chief scientist. "The entire planet is one massive computer, but it's also alive somehow. It's been maintaining itself for millions of years, waiting for us." They landed in what had once been the capital city, now preserved in perfect condition by technology that defied understanding. As they stepped out of their ship, the city responded to their presence. Buildings shifted to create pathways. Lights flickered on to guide them, and in the distance, a massive structure began to rise from the ground. "The Central Archive," Jang Min said, somehow knowing what it was without being told. "The repository of all architect knowledge." As they walked through the empty streets, Dr. Nam Young's instruments went wild. "Commander, I'm detecting power. Sources throughout the city. It's like the whole place is coming back to life." She was right. With each step, more systems activated. Fountains began to flow with liquid that sparkled like starlight. Gardens bloomed with plants that had been extinct for eons. Transportation pods that moved without any visible means of propulsion glided silently through the air. "It's beautiful," Park Yoon said softly. "How could anyone destroy something like this?" "Fear," replied a voice that came from everywhere at once. They spun around but saw no one. Then the air shimmered, and figures began to appear. Not solid beings, but projections of light and energy that took the shape of architects. Tall, graceful, with eyes that held the memory of ages. "You are the ones Dr. Park Mina awakened," said the nearest figure, speaking directly into their minds. "We have been waiting to show you the truth." The scene around them changed. Suddenly they were standing in the same city as it had been millions of years ago, filled with living architects going about their daily lives. The beings moved with purpose and grace, using technology so advanced it seemed like magic. "We were explorers," the figure explained as they watched architect ships launch toward the stars. "We sought knowledge, understanding, harmony between all forms of life. For 10 million years, we guided younger species, helped them grow, shared our discoveries freely. The vision shifted, showing other worlds, planets where different alien species worked together, sharing technology and culture. It was a galaxy where cooperation replaced conquest, where diversity was celebrated rather than feared. But some could not accept a universe where they were not supreme, the architect continued. Now they saw the beginning of the end. Ships bearing the symbols of the current galactic powers, approaching architect worlds with weapons charged. The EO, same species that now ruled the galaxy, united in their fear of what they could not control. We tried to negotiate, the figure said sadly. We offered to withdraw, to limit our influence, to let them rule as they wished. But they knew that as long as we existed, their way of domination could not last. Jiang Min watched in horror as the combined fleets attacked. Architect cities burned, their people died, and their great works were destroyed. But even as they fell, the architects were preparing their final gift. We seeded the galaxy with our technology, the figure explained, hidden it in places only the right species would find. We encoded our knowledge in forms that would only respond to minds capable of growth beyond conquest. Why humans? Dr. Nam Young asked. Because you refuse to accept the impossible, came the answer. Others fight until they are defeated. Then submit. You fight until you win, or until you become something that cannot be defeated. This is what we needed. The visions faded, leaving them standing once again in the empty city. But now they understood what they were seeing. Not ruins, but tools. Not a dead world, but a weapon aimed at the heart of galactic tyranny. The central archive contains everything, the architect figure said. Our science, our philosophy, our technology, our plans for a just galaxy. It is yours now. But remember, power without wisdom leads to the same darkness we fought against. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the human offensive was accelerating. Captain Siak led a fleet of enhanced architect vessels against the Vorthak, core worlds, each ship capable of devastating entire planets. But the orders were specific. Destroy military targets, capture infrastructure, preserve civilian populations. Sir, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Shin A. The Vorthak. Third Fleet is moving to intercept us. Siak smiled grimly. The Third Fleet was the pride of the Vorthak Empire, 500 ships armed with the most advanced weapons their species possessed. A year ago, a single one of those ships could have destroyed the entire human resistance. How many ships do we have? He asked. 12, sir. More than enough. Begin the engagement. The battle was less a fight than a demonstration. Human ships phased in and out of reality, appearing behind enemy vessels to deliver precise strikes that disabled than destroyed. Vorthak weapons fired uselessly at targets that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. This is impossible, transmitted the Vorthak admiral as his flagship's systems failed around him. No species possesses such technology. Wrong, Osak replied over the communication channel. The architects possessed it. We're just using what they left behind. Within an hour, the entire Third Fleet had surrendered. Siak's ships had suffered no damage at all. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. Human forces struck at military targets with surgical precision, crippling the ability of the galactic powers to wage war while leaving their civilian populations unharmed. It was conquest, but not the brutal kind the galaxy was used to. Dr. Park Mina, now permanently linked to the Architect Network, monitored all operations from her position aboard the command ship. Her consciousness existed in multiple places at once coordinating attacks, analyzing data, and slowly reshaping the fundamental laws of physics to favor human forces. Sister, Li Hyun said, approaching her chamber with growing concern. The other species are beginning to panic. Some are talking about using planet killers against their own worlds rather than let us capture them. She turned to look at him, her eyes now glowing with the same blue light as the architect technology. They fear us because they judge us by their own standards, she said. They assume we will treat them as they treated others. And will we? No, she said simply. The architect memories show me what justice looks like. It is not revenge. It is the prevention of future atrocities. You're changing, Li Hyun said quietly. Every day, you become less human. Dr. Park Mina was silent for a long moment. Perhaps, she finally said. But isn't that what we need? Someone who can think beyond human limitations? Back on the architect homeworld, Jang Min's team had reached the central archive. The massive structure rose before them like a mountain made of crystal and light, its surface covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The knowledge of 10 million years, Dr. Nam Young breathed. Everything they learned, everything they built, everything they dreamed. As they approached the entrance, the building recognized them and opened. Inside, corridors stretched in directions that seemed to exist outside normal geometry. Rooms contained technologies that could reshape, matter, bend time, or reach across dimensional barriers. "Commander," Park Yoon called from a chamber filled with floating spheres of light. "I think I found their history records." The spheres responded to his touch, projecting holographic images of the galaxy's past. They saw civilizations rise and fall, species evolve and transform. Technologies develop that could create or destroy worlds. But most importantly, they saw the plan. The architects didn't just hide their technology, Jang Min realized. They designed it to create a specific outcome. Everything that's happening now, they predicted it. Dr. Nam Young nodded, studying the data streams flowing around them. They knew that eventually, a species would arise that could use their gifts. They planned for us to find them, to be enhanced by them, to become the guardians of galactic justice they had tried to be. But they also built in safeguards, Park Yoon added, pointing to sections. Admiral Kang Sol stood on the bridge of the Resurrection, a ship that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously and could unmake stars with a thought. Through the view screen, she watched as the Vorthak homeworld of Reptilian Prime burned, not with fire, but with the light of transformation. "Status report," she commanded, her voice carrying across multiple reality layers where her consciousness now operated. "All military installations neutralized," reported Captain Yu Jin from the tactical station. "Civilian populations are being relocated to temporary habitats while we reshape their infrastructure." It had taken the human forces exactly 4 hours to overwhelm defenses that had protected the Vorthak capital for 1,000 years. The Reptilian Empire's most powerful world now belonged to humanity. Its weapons turned to dust and its armies scattered. But this wasn't the brutal conquest the galaxy expected. Instead of death camps and mass executions, humans were building better cities, cleaner oceans, and technologies that would let the Vorthak population live in comfort they had never known. "Any word from Emperor Krex?" Admiral Kang Sol asked. "He's barricaded in the Imperial Palace with his personal guard," Yu Jin replied. "He's demanding to negotiate." Admiral Kang Sol almost smiled. 3 months ago, Emperor Krex had broadcast a message calling for the total extermination of humanity. Now he wanted to talk. "Inform His Imperial Magnificence that I'll see him in an hour," she said. "Have Specialist Lim Hai prepare the neural interface. It's time the Emperor learned what his empire really did to us." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as human forces swept through space like an unstoppable tide. The Calarian Confederacy fell in a single day when humans convinced their entire fleet to switch sides. The Hydrax Collective surrendered without fighting when their crystal cities began transforming themselves into forms more suitable for human administration. Specialist Lim Hai had become something beyond human understanding. Her mind could reach across star systems. Her consciousness could inhabit multiple bodies simultaneously, and her understanding of matter and energy let her reshape reality with casual thoughts. She materialized in Emperor Krex's throne room without bothering with doors or walls, her form shifting between solid matter and pure energy. The Vorthak guards raised their weapons, but the devices simply refused to function in her presence. "Your Imperial Magnificence," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the palace walls vibrate. "We need to talk." Emperor Krex was a massive Vorthak, his scales dark with age and his eyes holding the cold intelligence that had made his species masters of half the galaxy. He had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved entire species without ever showing mercy. Now he trembled. "What do you want, human?" he hissed, trying to maintain some dignity even as his empire crumbled around him. "Truth," Limhi replied. She gestured, and the air filled with holographic images. "I want you to see what your orders actually accomplished. The throne room filled with scenes from the human genocide, children running from orbital bombardments, families vaporized by weapons designed to cause maximum suffering, entire cities turned to ash in minutes." "Stop," Emperor Krex said, but his voice lacked conviction. 50 billion deaths, Limhi continued, her form growing brighter and more terrible. Entire bloodlines erased, cultures that took millennia to develop destroyed in hours, all because you were afraid of what humans might become. The images shifted, showing what humans had become. Ships that could cross galaxies in heartbeats, weapons that could reshape planets, minds that operated on levels the Vorthak couldn't comprehend. "You were right to fear us," Limhi said softly, "but not for the reasons you thought." Emperor Krex found his voice. "What happens now? Do you kill us all? Turn us into slaves? Take revenge for what we did?" "No," Limhi said, and her form became gentler, more recognizably human. "We're going to do something much worse from your perspective. We're going to save you." The palace around them began to change. Walls that had been covered in weapons and trophies from conquered worlds transformed into displays of art and knowledge. The harsh lighting softened into something warm and welcoming. "You built an empire on fear and domination," Limhi explained. "Your people know nothing but conquest and submission. They've never experienced cooperation, growth, or the simple joy of creating something beautiful." She gestured again, and the images showed human-controlled worlds. Former slaves working alongside their previous masters, building cities that served everyone. Technologies being shared freely instead of hoarded. Children of different species playing together in parks where weapons factories had once stood. "We're going to teach your people what they could have been," Limhi continued. "We're going to show them possibilities they never imagined. And when they see what they missed, when they understand what their empire cost them, that will be a justice more complete than any revenge." Meanwhile, Dr. Park Mina worked from the command center of the Architect homeworld, her consciousness spread across the galaxy like a vast web. She could see every human operation, coordinate every movement, and adjust reality itself to ensure their success. "Sister!" Li Hyun's voice came through speakers around her chamber. "The Galactic Council is requesting a ceasefire. They want to discuss surrender terms." Dr. Park Mina laughed, a sound that echoed across multiple dimensions. "They still don't understand. This isn't a war anymore. It's an evolution." She showed him what she could see. The galaxy as it was becoming under human guidance. Trade routes that connected species in mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Research stations where different cultures shared knowledge freely. Worlds being terraformed not for conquest, but for beauty. "Look at the Andromedans," she said, highlighting a region of space that had been dark for centuries. "They've been hiding from galactic civilization for thousands of years because they knew it would destroy them. Now, they're sending ambassadors." Li Hyun studied the displays, still trying to understand what his sister had become. "And the species that resist us?" "Are learning that resistance is pointless," Dr. Park Mina replied. "Not because we're destroying them, but because we're making their way of life obsolete. Why fight for scraps when abundance is freely available?" Why dominate others when cooperation brings greater rewards? On a fortress world at the edge of Hydrax space, Captain Osyok was demonstrating this principle. His forces had surrounded the planet, but instead of attacking, they had simply begun building. In the space of days, they constructed orbital habitats more beautiful than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Gardens that stretched for kilometers, cities that floated like dreams among the stars, and technologies that turned asteroid debris into works of art. "The people down there," reported Lieutenant Shinnei, "they're abandoning their posts to get a closer look." Oh, Siak nodded. It was happening everywhere. Species that had known nothing but military discipline and rigid hierarchy were seeing alternatives they had never imagined. Soldiers were laying down their weapons not out of fear, but out of wonder. "Open a channel to the surface," he ordered. Planetary governor appeared on screen, a crystalline hydrax whose color patterns showed deep confusion. "Human commander, what is the meaning of this display?" "It's a gift," Oseok said simply. "A demonstration of what your world could become, if you join us willingly. And if we refuse?" Oseok gestured toward the orbital constructions. "Then we'll build paradise around you until your people choose it for themselves. We have time, we have patience, and we have the power to make your military resistance irrelevant." The governor's crystals flashed with agitation. "You're trying to seduce us into slavery." "We're offering you freedom," Oseok corrected. "Freedom from the need to fight for resources, freedom from the fear of conquest, freedom to explore, to create, to become more than you ever thought possible." As if to emphasize his point, one of the orbital habitats began broadcasting music, complex harmonies that blend Hydrax crystal songs with human compositions and architectural, acoustics that turned the entire structure into a massive instrument. "Your choice," Oseok said, "but we'll be here either way." The transformation wasn't limited to military conquest. Throughout human-controlled space, entire civilizations were being rebuilt from the ground up. On former slave worlds, humans were teaching populations that had known nothing but servitude how to govern themselves. On heavily militarized planets, weapons factories were becoming centers of art and learning. But perhaps the most dramatic changes were happening to humanity itself. Enhanced by architect technology, humans were becoming something new. They could live for centuries, think at superhuman speeds, and manipulate matter and energy with their thoughts. Yet they retained something essentially human, the ability to see individuals rather than just statistics, to value growth over conquest, to choose justice over convenience. "Admiral," Yu Jin reported to Kang Sol as they prepared to move to the next target system, "we're receiving surrender offers from over 300 worlds. They want to join the human sphere voluntarily." Kang Sol wasn't surprised. Fear had held the old galactic order together, but humans offered something better: hope. For the first time in millions of years, entire species were seeing possibilities beyond survival and submission. "Accept all surrenders," she ordered. "But make it clear that—" President Bei Wan stood in the Great Hall of New Geneva, the floating capital city that humans had built in the empty space where Earth once orbited. Through the transparent walls, she could see representatives from over 1,000 species gathering for the first session of the Terran Ascendancy's Galactic Assembly. 6 months ago, she had been a refugee hiding in an asteroid. Today, she was the elected leader of the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever known. "Madam President," said her aide, Secretary Cho Rim, "the Vorthak delegation is requesting a private meeting before the session begins." Bei Wan nodded. She had expected this. The reptilian empire that had started the genocide was now desperately trying to secure favorable terms in humanity's new order. "Show them to Conference Room 7, she said, "and have General Shin Ai monitor the meeting. If they're planning anything stupid, I want to know immediately." General Shin Ai had become something beyond a normal military commander. Enhanced by architect technology, she could perceive threats across multiple dimensions and coordinate defenses that operated on principles alien scientists were still trying to understand. More importantly, she could sense intentions. Hostile. Thoughts created patterns in space-time that her enhanced mind could read like text on a page. The Vorthak delegation was led by Emperor Krex himself, though his title meant little now. His empire had been systematically dismantled, its military forces converted to peaceful purposes, its slave populations liberated and relocated to worlds of their own choosing. President Bei Wan, he said formally, his scaled head bowing in what passed for Vorthak respect. I come to discuss terms. There are no terms to discuss, she replied calmly. The Terran ascendancy has already established the principles that will govern galactic civilization. Species that accept them will prosper. Those that don't will find themselves isolated and irrelevant. Emperor Krex's tail lashed in frustration. You're demanding the complete abandonment of everything our culture represents. Your culture represents genocide, Bei Wan said without emotion. It represents slavery, conquest, and the systematic oppression of hundreds of species. Yes, we're demanding you abandon it. And what do we get in return? Bei Wan gestured toward the walls, which became transparent to show the view outside. The space around New Geneva was filled with construction projects that defied imagination, cities that existed in folded space-time, gardens that grew in the vacuum of space, art installations that spanned entire star systems. You get to become part of something greater than conquest, she said. You get to discover what your species might have achieved if it had chosen cooperation over domination. Through her enhanced senses, General Shin Ai could feel the Emperor's internal struggle. Part of him was terrified of losing everything his people had built, but another part was fascinated by what he was seeing. Your people have been enslaved by their own culture, Bei Wan continued, locked into cycles of violence and dominance that prevented them from growing beyond their primitive instincts. We're offering freedom from that prison. The transformation of galactic civilization was happening faster than anyone had thought possible. On worlds throughout human space, former enemies were learning to live in ways their species had never experienced. The Calarian ambassador, diplomat Teal 9, floated in her tank as she addressed the Assembly's Economic Committee. Her tentacles moved in patterns that indicated deep satisfaction. The human economic model is beyond our previous understanding, she reported. Instead of scarcity-based competition, they have created abundance-based cooperation. Worlds that once fought over resources now share them freely because the human technology makes scarcity obsolete. It was true. Architect technology could convert matter at the atomic level, turning asteroids into food, weapons into art, wastelands into gardens. The economic systems that had driven galactic conflict for millions of years had become as obsolete as sword fighting in an age of starships. But the changes went deeper than economics. On the former slave world of Terminus, human administrators were teaching liberated populations how to govern themselves. Species that had known nothing but obedience for generations were learning to make choices, to debate, to compromise. It's difficult, admitted Overseer Park Sue as she met with newly elected representatives from 6 different species. They keep asking us to tell them what to do. The concept of self-determination is alien to them. Give them time, replied Counselor Jorvek, a former Hydrax slave who had become one of the first non-humans to achieve full integration with architect technology. My people had forgotten how to make choices for ourselves, but humans showed us it was possible. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The species that had been marked for extinction were now teaching the galaxy how to live. Dr. Park Mina materialized in the assembly hall as the session was about to begin, her form shifting between flesh and energy as she chose. She was no longer entirely human in any recognizable sense, but she retained the core values that had defined her species. "Sister," President Bei Wan said quietly as they met before the ceremony, "are you sure about this?" "The new constitution represents the best hope for lasting peace," Dr. Park Mina replied. "The architect memories show me what happens when civilizations try to maintain stability through force. It always fails eventually." The constitution they had drafted was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of defining rights in terms of species or territorial control, it established principles that applied to all intelligent life. The right to exist without fear, the right to grow and explore, the right to choose one's own path. Most importantly, it established the fundamental rule that would govern the new galactic order. Never again would any species face extinction for the convenience of others. "The assembly will now come to order," announced Secretary Cho Rim, her voice carrying across the vast hall where representatives from across the galaxy had gathered. Some came willingly, eager to be part of humanity's new order. Others came because they had no choice, their military forces converted to peaceful purposes and their governments replaced by human administrators. But all of them were here, acknowledging a new reality. Humanity, the species that had almost been exterminated, now set the rules for galactic civilization. General Shin Ai stood at attention as President Bei Wan rose to address the assembly. Through her enhanced perception, she could sense the emotions radiating from the gathered representatives. Fear from some, hope from others, curiosity from many. "Delegates of the Galactic Assembly," President Bei Wan began, "we gathered today not as conquerors and conquered, but as neighbors in a galaxy that has room for all of us." Her words were translated into thousands of languages and communication methods, reaching species that communicated through color changes, pheromone releases, and quantum fluctuations. 4 years ago, this assembly voted to exterminate humanity because we were deemed a threat to galactic stability. Today, I stand before you to announce that this assessment was correct. A ripple of unease passed through the hall. "We were a threat," she continued, "to systems built on oppression. We were a threat to empires founded on fear. We were a threat to the idea that some beings matter more than others." The Vorthak delegation shifted uncomfortably, while representatives from former slave species sat straighter in their seats. "But we offer something better than what we destroyed. We offer a galaxy where strength is measured not by how many you can dominate, but by how many you can lift up. Where security comes not from the threat of annihilation, but from the promise of mutual prosperity." Emperor Krex found himself listening despite his intentions to resist. The human leader's words carried a conviction that made them hard to dismiss. "The Terran ascendancy will govern this galaxy according to principles our species has learned through suffering," President Bei Wan declared. "We know what it means to face extinction. We know what it means to lose everything. We will ensure that no other species endures what we endured." Dr. Park Mina stepped forward, her enhanced form causing reality to ripple around her. "The new constitution has been distributed to all delegates. You have 3 days to review it and submit any concerns or questions. And if we refuse to sign," called out the Kalarian ambassador, "then you'll find yourselves governing empty space," Dr. Park Mina replied calmly. "Your populations will be relocated to worlds where they can prosper under the new system. Your territorial claims will be redistributed to species that accept the Constitution's principles." It wasn't a threat. It was simply a statement of fact. Humanity now possessed the power to reshape the galaxy as they saw fit, and they were choosing to create something unprecedented, an empire based on justice rather than force. As the assembly session continued, reports came in from across human space. On the former Vorthak capital, Emperor Krex's subjects were experiencing democracy for the first time in their species' history. The results were chaotic but promising. On liberated slave worlds, populations that had known nothing but servitude were learning to dream of better futures. Human teachers worked alongside reformed oppressors, showing both groups that cooperation could achieve more than domination ever had. In the research stations scattered throughout the galaxy, scientists from hundreds of species worked together on projects that would have been impossible. Fleet Commander Li Hyun stood at the center of the Great Assembly, watching as representatives from across the galaxy took their oaths of allegiance to the new galactic order. 10 years had passed since the day he had fled Earth with the last human refugees. Now he presided over the largest gathering of intelligent species in galactic history. The chamber itself was a marvel of architect technology, existing in folded space that allowed beings from thousands of worlds to attend in person. The air shimmered with translation fields that converted thoughts and intentions directly between species that had never been able to communicate before. Today marks the 10th anniversary of the Terran ascendancy, he announced, his words reaching every corner of the vast space. 10 years ago, our species faced extinction. Today, we celebrate the birth of a galaxy where extinction is no longer possible. The assembled delegates rose in acknowledgement, some on legs, others floating in hover chairs, still others existing as pure energy that had learned to take physical form for the occasion. It was diversity beyond anything the old galactic order had ever imagined. At his side, Dr. Park Mina observed the ceremony with senses that operated across multiple dimensions. She was no longer recognizably human in form, her consciousness having expanded to encompass technologies and perspectives that transcended physical existence. Yet her core remained unchanged. The fierce intelligence and compassion that had driven her to save her species now worked to protect all life in the galaxy. The integration is nearly complete, she told her brother through direct neural communication. 97% of galactic civilization now operates under ascendancy principles. Li Hyun nodded, remembering the desperate refugee he had been. The transformation was almost impossible to believe. Where once there had been empires built on fear and domination, now there were cooperative networks that spanned star clusters. Where once species had fought over scarce resources, now abundance was freely shared through technology that could transform matter at will. "Emperor Krex," he called out, and the former Vorthak ruler stepped forward. The reptilian leader looked nothing like the tyrant who had once commanded fleets bent on human extermination. Enhanced by architect technology and transformed by years of learning what cooperation could achieve, he had become something his species had never seen before, a leader who served rather than commanded. "Fleet Commander," Krex said formally, "I bring greetings from the Vorthak Republic and our commitment to the principles of the Galactic Constitution." The word Republic still sounded strange when applied to a species that had known only imperial rule for millions of years. But the change was real. The Vorthak had learned to govern themselves through democratic consensus, their natural aggression channeled into productive competition rather than destructive conquest. "Your people's progress has been remarkable," Li Hyun replied. "The terraform projects you've completed in the Outer Rim are among the most beautiful in the galaxy." It was true. Former Vorthak military engineers had become master terraformers, using their skills to create garden worlds where refugees from dozens of species could build new lives. The same precision they had once applied to orbital bombardments now grew forests and sculpted mountain ranges. The ceremony continued with reports from across human space. Admiral Kang Sol detailed the completion of the Perseus project, where an entire spiral arm had been converted into a vast research and cultural center. General Shin A announced the success of the integration protocol, which had allowed members of over 50 species to achieve partial fusion with architect technology. But, perhaps most importantly, President Bai Wan presented the annual peace report. "For the 3,653rd consecutive day," she announced, "no intelligent species in the galaxy has faced the threat of extinction. No worlds have been destroyed by warfare. No populations have been enslaved or displaced against their will. The assembly erupted in celebration, clicking, humming, flashing, and singing in the unique ways each species expressed joy. It was a sound that would have been cacophony under the old order, but the translation fields wove it into a harmony that celebrated the diversity they protected. Li Hyun remembered the last time he had heard such a sound. It had been on Earth, in the final hours before the bombardment began. Children laughing in playgrounds, families gathering for evening meals, humans being human without fear of judgment or attack. The next phase of our expansion will focus on the Andromeda Galaxy, Dr. Park Mina announced, her form shifting to display holographic star charts. Long-range sensors have detected civilizations there that may be facing similar challenges to what we once experienced. The Andromeda Project represented humanity's ultimate evolution. No longer content to simply protect their own galaxy, they were reaching across the void to extend their principles to other collections of stars. It was ambitious beyond anything any species had ever attempted, but with architect technology, even the gaps between galaxies were no longer barriers. The same rules apply, Li Hyun added. We observe, we offer assistance if requested, and we never impose our values through force. The choice to join our community must always be freely made. This principle had become the foundation of human governance. Despite possessing the power to reshape reality itself, they had chosen to rule through example rather than compulsion. Species joined the ascendancy because they wanted what it offered, not because they feared what might happen if they refused. In the years since the war's end, some had questioned this approach. Why allow holdout species to remain independent? Why not simply force universal compliance with obviously superior systems? But humanity remembered what it felt like to have such choices taken away. The memory of extinction shaped every decision they made. I have a personal announcement, Li Hyun said as the formal ceremonies concluded. Around the chamber, delegates leaned forward with interest. After 10 years of service, I am stepping down as fleet commander. It's time for the next generation to lead. The successor he had chosen was Captain Song Hana, the same officer who had led the first successful human counterattack against the Vorthak fortress. Enhanced by years of integration with architect technology, she represented the best of what humanity had become, powerful but compassionate, determined but just. The galaxy is in good hands, he continued, looking out at the assembled representatives. But remember, what we've built here isn't guaranteed to last forever. Each generation must choose to preserve and improve what they inherit. As the assembly concluded, delegates began returning to their home worlds to report on the proceedings. Many would carry news of new opportunities, new technologies, new partnerships that would benefit their people. Others would return with simply the knowledge that they were part of something larger than themselves. Emperor Krex approached Li Hyun as the chamber began to empty. Fleet Commander, he said, I wanted to thank you personally. For what? For showing mercy when you had no reason to do so, Krex replied. My people tried to exterminate yours. You could have returned the favor. Li Hyun studied the transformed reptilian leader. Revenge would have made us no better than what we fought against. Besides, your people have contributed far more to the galaxy in the last 10 years than they destroyed in the previous 1,000. It was a gracious statement, but it was also true. Former military species like the Vorthak had brought discipline and organizational skills that had proven invaluable in managing the complexity of galactic civilization. Their transformation from destroyers to builders had become one of the great success stories of the New Age. Dr. Park Mina materialized beside them, her form more energy than matter. The long-term projections are encouraging, she reported. If current trends continue, we should achieve full galactic integration within another generation. And then? Krex asked. Then we start on the next galaxy, she replied with something that might have been a smile. The universe is vast, and there's always more work to do. As Li Hyun made his way through the corridors of New Geneva after the ceremony, he passed monuments to the species that had been lost before humanity's intervention. Entire civilizations that had been exterminated by the old galactic order, their histories preserved so they would never be forgotten. But he also saw something more hopeful. Schools where children from hundreds of species learned together. Research. Centers where impossible discoveries were made daily, and art galleries that displayed beauty from across the galaxy. The human district of the city remained largely unchanged, a reminder of where they had come from. Simple buildings, familiar foods, and the sound of his native language spoken with accents he remembered from Earth. But even here, the changes were evident. Human children played with friends whose parents came from distant stars. And the old boundaries between us and them had become meaningless. That evening, Li Hyun stood on his balcony looking out at the stars. Somewhere among them, human explorers were making contact with new species. Human teachers were sharing knowledge that would improve countless lives, and human defenders were ensuring that no one would ever again face the terror his people had experienced. The galaxy was no longer a place where the strong preyed upon the weak. It had become something unprecedented in the history of intelligent life. A community where every voice mattered.